The harsh winds of the New Mexico territory carried the scent of rain, though the parched earth had seen none for weeks. Nathan Voss pulled his hat lower against the setting sun, squinting as he followed the faint hoofprints that might lead to his missing mare. The year was 1879, and in these parts, a man without a horse was little more than a walking target for bandits or worse. As he crested the hill overlooking a small creek bed that still held water despite the drought, what he saw made him pause, a sight both pitiful and strangely beautiful that would forever change his life. A woman with tangled auburn hair knelt beside a spindly colt, its ribs showing prominently through a dull coat. She was cupping water in her hands, letting the foal drink from her palms, whispering encouragements, though she herself looked nearly as starved as the young horse. The tattered remains of what might have once been a fine dress hung from her thin frame, and Nathan noticed with a pang that she'd tied her own bootlaces around the colt's injured leg in a makeshift bandage. Nathan stepped on a twig, causing it to snap beneath his boot. The woman's head whipped around, her eyes wide with fear. She positioned herself protectively in front of the colt. "Stay back," she warned, her voice hoarse but determined. "We've nothing worth taking." Nathan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Madam, I don't aim to hurt you or the little one." He nodded toward his canteen. "I've got water and some jerky in my pack. Looks to me like you both could use some nourishment." The woman's gaze darted between Nathan and the path behind him, clearly wondering if he was alone or if others would appear. "No one else with me," Nathan assured her, reading her thoughts. "I'm just tracking my mare. She broke loose 2 nights back." He took a careful step forward, then another. "Name's Nathan Voss. I've got a small ranch about 5 miles east of here." The woman's shoulders remained tense, but hunger won out over fear. "Madeline," she said finally. "Madeline Grant." Nathan approached slowly, kneeling a respectful distance away. He opened his canteen and offered it first. As Madeline reached for it, their fingers brushed and Nathan noticed the raw skin on her hands. "How long you been out here?" he asked, pulling jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag. Madeline took a small sip of water before answering. 3 days, maybe 4. She gestured to the colt. "Found him caught in barbed wire, no mare in sight. Couldn't just leave him." Nathan nodded, understanding. He tore a piece of jerky into smaller bits, offering some to Madeline and then to the colt, who sniffed cautiously before accepting. "We'll feed you both together," Nathan said, the words coming naturally. "Get some strength back in you, then we can see about getting you somewhere safe." Madeline's eyes welled with unexpected tears. "Why would you help us?" Nathan shrugged, uncomfortable with the question. "Out here, folks help folks. That's all there is to it." He studied the colt's injured leg. "That's a mighty fine splint you've made there. You know horses." A flicker of pride crossed her face. "My father raised thoroughbreds back in Kentucky. Before." Her voice trailed off and Nathan didn't press. Everyone in these parts had a before. As the sky darkened, Nathan built a small fire. The colt had settled beside Madeline, its head resting trustingly in her lap. The firelight softened the hollows in her cheeks, and Nathan found himself wondering about her story. "That colt's taken a shine to you," he observed, passing her a cup of coffee he'd prepared. "He's a fighter," she replied, stroking the foal's neck. "Someone abandoned him, I think. Or his mother was taken. Might belong to the Hendersons," Nathan mused. "They lost some stock to rustlers last month, or could be one of the wild herds that roam these parts." Madeline sipped the coffee gratefully. "What will happen to him?" "Well," Nathan said, considering, "I've got pasture and shelter, room for another horse, and my mare, if I find her, would make a fine foster mother." He hesitated, then added, "I've room for you too if you need a place to stay while you figure things out. Got a spare room in my house." No strings attached. Suspicion flashed across Madeline's features. Most men want something in return for such generosity. I'm not most men, Miss Grant, Nathan replied evenly. Just offering Christian charity, nothing more. Come morning, if you'd rather make your own way, I'll give you provisions and wish you well. They fell silent, the crackling fire filling the space between them. Eventually, exhaustion claimed Madeline and she slept, still cradling the colt's head. Nathan watched over them both through the night, wondering what circumstances had brought this refined Kentucky woman to such a desperate state in the New Mexico territory. Dawn broke with a spectacular array of colors across the eastern sky. Nathan had already rekindled the fire and was brewing a fresh pot of coffee when Madeline stirred. The colt seemed stronger this morning, though still weak. "How's our patient?" Nathan asked, handing her a tin cup. Madeline smiled tiredly. "Better, I think. He took more water during the night." Nathan nodded approvingly. "I've been thinking. My mare's tracks don't continue past this point. I'm guessing she might have headed back to the ranch. If you're willing, we could head that way. Get you both some proper food and care." Madeline hesitated and Nathan could see her weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. "The colt needs shelter and proper care. I accept your offer, Mr. Voss, temporarily." "Nathan, please," he said, offering his hand to help her up. "And temporary it is." It took most of the morning to make their way back to Nathan's ranch, moving slowly for the colt's benefit. Madeline walked beside the foal, encouraging it with soft words, while Nathan led the way. When the colt faltered, Nathan fashioned a travois from branches and his coat, allowing the young horse to rest while they continued. As they crested the final hill, Nathan's modest ranch came into view, a small cabin with a barn beside it, a corral, and several fenced pastures. A thin plume of smoke rose from the chimney, which made Nathan pause. "You expecting someone?" Madeline asked, noting his hesitation. "No," he replied cautiously. "Stay here with the colt. I'll check it out." Madeline nodded, pulling the foal close as Nathan approached the cabin, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. As he neared the door, it swung open to reveal a stocky older man with a gray beard. "About time you showed up, Nate," the man called. "Found your mare yesterday, brought her back." "You got coffee brewing." Nathan's tension dissolved into laughter. "Hector, you old scoundrel, you nearly got yourself shot." The older man grinned, then peered past Nathan toward Madeline and the colt. "Seems you found more than you were looking for." Nathan waved Madeline forward. "Madeline Grant, this is Hector Jimenez, my nearest neighbor and oldest friend in these parts." Hector tipped his hat respectfully, though his eyebrows raised in question. Madeline, despite her bedraggled appearance, managed a dignified nod in return. "Miss Grant saved this colt," Nathan explained. "They both need some looking after." Understanding dawned in Hector's weathered face. "Well then, let's get them settled. Julia's in the barn, Nate. Seemed mighty pleased to be home." Within the hour, the colt was bedded down in the barn, with Nathan's mare, Julia, watching curiously from the adjacent stall. Madeline had properly cleaned and bandaged the foal's leg, and Nathan had provided oats soaked in warm water to help nourish the starved animal. Hector departed after extracting a promise from Nathan to bring Madeline to Sunday dinner with his wife, Rosa. Then Nathan showed Madeline to the cabin's spare room, a simple space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the eastern pasture. "It's not much," Nathan said apologetically, "but it's clean and dry." Madeline looked around with undisguised gratitude. "It's more than I expected to have yesterday." She met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Nathan," he nodded, suddenly awkward. "There's a washroom out back. I'll heat water for you. And I believe I have some of my sister's clothes in storage." She visited last spring, left some things behind. While Madeline bathed, Nathan prepared a simple meal of beans, salt pork, and cornbread. By the time she emerged, wearing a blue calico dress that had belonged to his sister, the table was set. Her damp hair hung in waves around shoulders that seemed too thin for the dress, but clean and properly clothed, Madeline's natural beauty emerged more clearly. Nathan found himself momentarily speechless. "Is something wrong?" she asked, tugging self-consciously at the dress. "No," he managed. "It's just, you clean up nice is all." A hint of color touched Madeline's cheeks as she took a seat at the table. "It feels wonderful to be clean again." "I can't thank you enough." They ate in companionable silence for a while, Madeline clearly savoring each bite despite the simple fare. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town for supplies," Nathan said eventually. "You're welcome to join me or stay here if you prefer." Madeline considered. "I should stay with the Colt. He needs regular feeding and care if he's to recover fully." Nathan nodded, relieved. The thought of presenting this mysterious woman in town raised questions he wasn't prepared to answer. "I'll bring back some things for you. Proper clothes, toiletries." "I have no money to repay you," she said quietly. "Consider it an advance on wages," Nathan replied. "I could use help around here. The garden's been neglected since my mother passed, and truth be told, my cooking leaves something to be desired." Madeline smiled. "You've been more than kind, but I won't take charity indefinitely. I accept your offer of work, at least until I can repay your kindness." As darkness fell, they checked on the Colt one last time. The foal had gained enough strength to stand and was nursing eagerly from a bottle Madeline had prepared. "He's resilient," Nathan observed as they walked back to the cabin. "He reminds me of myself," Madeline said softly. At Nathan's questioning glance, she added, "Determined to survive despite the odds." That night, as Nathan lay in bed, he found himself wondering about the circumstances that had brought Madeline to such desperate straits. Her speech and manners betrayed an educated background, and the way she cared for the Colt showed considerable knowledge. Yet here she was, alone and starving in the wilderness. Nathan resolved to give her time to share her story when she was ready. Over the next 2 weeks, a rhythm developed. Each morning, they would rise early to tend to the animals. Nathan worked his land and cattle, while Madeline nursed the Colt back to health and began restoring the neglected garden. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation that grew increasingly comfortable. Nathan learned that Madeline had indeed come from a prosperous Kentucky family who had lost everything in the panic of 1873. Her father had taken his own life, and her mother had succumbed to consumption shortly after. At 22, with no prospects and distant relatives unwilling to help, Madeline had accepted a marriage proposal from a businessman heading west, a decision she'd come to regret. "Walter seemed kind at first," she explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance above the pasture. "But once we were traveling west, his true nature emerged. He was cruel, controlling." She hesitated. "When we reached Santa Fe, I discovered he already had a wife in California. I was to be something else entirely." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her continue. "I fled during the night, took nothing but the clothes I wore. I've been running for nearly 2 weeks, staying off the main trails." She gazed toward the barn where the Colt, now named Chance, was recovering nicely. "Finding him gave me purpose when I was ready to give up." Nathan considered her words carefully. "This Walter, should I be concerned he might come looking?" Madeline shook her head. "He'd lose standing in the community if it became known he tried to bring a second wife home. His reputation means everything to him." Relief mingled with another emotion Nathan couldn't quite name. The thought of Madeline leaving stirred an unexpected discomfort in his chest. On Sunday, they attended dinner at Hector and Rosa Jimenez's home as promised. Rosa, a warm woman with intelligent eyes, welcomed Madeline like a daughter, pulling her into the kitchen to teach her the secrets of her renowned sopapillas while the men discussed cattle prices on the porch. "Your Miss Grant is quite a lady," Hector observed, lighting his pipe. "Refined, but not afraid of hard work. Rosa says she's got a natural way with the garden, too." "She's not my Miss Grant," Nathan protested, perhaps too quickly. Hector chuckled. "Whatever you say, amigo, but I see how you look at her when you think no one notices." Nathan felt heat rise in his face. "She's had a difficult time. Needs a safe place, that's all." "MMHMM," Hector murmured, unconvinced. "And your sudden interest in shaving daily and wearing your good shirt for dinner at home, that's just coincidence." Before Nathan could respond, the women emerged from the kitchen, Madeline carrying a plate of golden pastries, her face flushed from the cooking heat and Rosa's lively conversation. "Nathan, Rosa has been teaching me the most wonderful recipes," Madeline said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Wait until you taste these." The simple pleasure in her voice made something twist in Nathan's chest. He caught Hector's knowing glance and looked away, suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. The following weeks brought subtle changes. Madeline's cheeks filled out as proper nutrition restored her health. The garden flourished under her care, producing vegetables that transformed Nathan's simple meals into something more satisfying. Chance grew stronger daily, following Madeline around like a devoted puppy when she worked outside. One evening in late July, nearly a month after Nathan had found them by the creek, a summer storm rolled in with startling ferocity. Thunder crashed overhead as they rushed to secure the animals and property against the deluge. In the barn, as they worked together to calm the nervous horses, a particularly violent thunderclap spooked Julia. The mare reared suddenly, nearly striking Madeline. Nathan reacted instinctively, pulling Madeline against his chest and out of harm's way. For a moment they stood frozen, rain dripping from their clothes, hearts pounding in tandem. Nathan became acutely aware of Madeline's warmth, the scent of her hair, the trust with which she leaned into him. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. Madeline looked up, raindrops clinging to her eyelashes. "Yes," she whispered. Something shifted in her expression as their eyes held. "Thanks to you." Nathan's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment he considered lowering his head to hers. Instead, he reluctantly released her and stepped back. "We should finish here before the storm worsens." They worked in charged silence, each stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. That night, sleep eluded Nathan as he replayed the moment in the barn, wondering what might have happened if he'd given in to the impulse to kiss her. The next morning brought clear skies and an unspoken tension. Madeline seemed distracted as she prepared breakfast, dropping a plate that shattered on the floor. When Nathan knelt to help her gather the pieces, their hands touched, and she pulled away as if burned. "Madeline," Nathan said carefully, "have I done something to upset you?" She shook her head, not meeting his eyes. "No, you've been nothing but kind." "Then what is it?" Madeline took a deep breath. "I've imposed on your hospitality for too long. I should move on, find employment in town perhaps." The thought of her leaving struck Nathan like a physical blow. "There's no need for that. Your work here more than compensates for your keep." "It's not about that," she said quietly. "Then what?" Madeline finally met his gaze. "I'm developing feelings that would make staying here complicated." Nathan's heart hammered against his ribs. "Complicated how?" "You know how," she replied, a hint of frustration in her voice. "You're an honorable man who offered shelter to a woman in need. I won't repay that kindness by creating an awkward situation. Nathan stepped closer. What if I told you I'm having the same problem? Surprise flickered across her face. What? Last night in the barn, he said. I wanted to kiss you. Have been wanting to for weeks now. Madeline's eyes widened. Why didn't you? Because I didn't want you to think I expected anything in return for helping you, he admitted. Because I wasn't sure you felt the same way. A tentative smile curved Madeline's lips. I do. This time Nathan didn't hesitate. He closed the distance between them, cradling her face in his calloused hands. Their first kiss was gentle, almost questioning, but the second held all the longing that had built over the past month. When they finally parted, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Not as my employee or my guest, but because you want to be here. With me? Madeline's arms tightened around his waist. Are you certain my past is your past? Nathan finished. I care about who you are now, who we might be together. August melted into September, and with it came new developments. Chance was fully recovered and growing rapidly, showing promise as a fine riding horse. The garden yielded a bountiful harvest that Madeline preserved for the coming winter. And most significantly, Nathan and Madeline's relationship deepened into something neither had expected to find in this harsh territory. They took rides together across Nathan's land, picnicked by the creek where they'd first met, and spent evenings on the porch sharing dreams and memories. Nathan spoke of his parents, who had claimed this land when he was just a boy, of the sister who had married an army officer and moved east, of his hopes to expand the ranch someday. Madeline shared more of her past, her love of literature, her talent for playing the piano, her dreams of teaching children before her family's financial collapse had altered her path. Perhaps you could still teach, Nathan suggested one evening as they watched the sunset. The town's growing. The schoolmaster mentioned needing an assistant. Madeline's face brightened at the prospect. Do you think they would hire me? Anyone who sees your way with chance would recognize your patience and kindness, Nathan replied. Essential qualities for a teacher, I'd imagine. The following week, they rode into town together. While Madeline met with the schoolmaster, Nathan purchased supplies and visited the blacksmith. As he waited for horseshoes to be fitted, he found himself outside the jeweler's shop, studying the modest selection of rings displayed in the window. Looking for something special, Mr. Voss? The jeweler, Mr. Abernathy, had stepped outside. Nathan hesitated. Might be. Don't suppose you have anything suitable for a proposal? The older man's eyebrows rose, but he smiled. As a matter of fact, I received a few nice pieces last month. Come in, come in. By the time Madeline found him an hour later, her eyes shining with excitement over the teaching position she'd been offered, Nathan had made his purchase, a small velvet box nestled securely in his pocket. The schoolmaster says I can start next month, she exclaimed. Just 2 days a week initially, but it's a beginning. Nathan's heart swelled at her happiness. I'm proud of you, he said, taking her hand. This calls for a celebration. How about dinner at the hotel? The Grand Hotel's dining room was the finest establishment in the small town, reserved for special occasions. Over a meal far more elaborate than Nathan's typical fare, they discussed Madeline's new position and made plans for her to use the wagon to travel to and from town on teaching days. As dessert was served, Nathan reached across the table for Madeline's hand. I have something to ask you, he said, his voice suddenly hoarse with nerves. Madeline's eyes widened as he slipped from his chair to kneel beside her. The other diners fell silent, watching. Madeline Grant, Nathan began, when I found you by that creek, feeding a starving colt despite your own hunger, I knew you were someone special. These past months have only confirmed what my heart suspected from the start. He withdrew the box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Madeline's eyes as she gazed at the ring, then at Nathan's hopeful face. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Nathan, I will marry you." The dining room erupted in applause as Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss his future bride. They were married on a crisp October afternoon, with golden leaves carpeting the ground and the mountains painted in autumn colors. The ceremony took place on their ranch, with Reverend Wilson officiating. Hector stood as Nathan's best man, while Rosa had helped Madeline prepare for her special day. The bride wore a cream-colored dress Rosa had altered from one of her daughters, with wildflowers in her hair. Nathan, in a new suit purchased for the occasion, could hardly believe his good fortune as Madeline walked toward him, her smile outshining the autumn sun. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promising to cherish and support one another through whatever life might bring. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan drew Madeline into a kiss that prompted whistles from their assembled friends and neighbors. The celebration continued well into the evening, with music, dancing, and food contributed by the community that had embraced Madeline as one of their own. Chance, now almost fully grown, wore a special halter decorated with ribbons for the occasion, standing proudly beside Julia in the nearby corral. As twilight descended and the last guests departed, Nathan and Madeline stood on their porch, arms wrapped around each other. "Happy, Mrs. Voss?" Nathan asked, still marveling at her new title. Madeline tipped her face up to his. "More than I ever imagined possible when you found me that day." "Best tracking I ever did," Nathan finished, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Finding you and Chance changed everything." "Do you ever think about how close we came to never meeting?" Madeline asked. "If your mare hadn't strayed, if I'd taken a different path." Nathan considered this. "I think some things are meant to be, despite the odds. Like a starving woman with enough compassion to share her last water with an abandoned colt. Or a cowboy generous enough to say, 'We'll feed you both together,'" Madeline added, echoing his words from that first meeting. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear. Finally, Nathan took his wife's hand. "Come on, Mrs. Voss. Tomorrow's the beginning of our new life together, and we've got plans to make." "Plans?" Madeline asked as they entered their home. Nathan nodded. "That garden of yours needs expanding if we're going to feed a growing family someday." Madeline's eyes sparkled at the implication. "I think that's a wonderful plan, Mr. Voss. I also thought," Nathan continued, "that we might build on a proper music room, find a piano for you." Tears of happiness filled Madeline's eyes. "You remembered." "I remember everything you tell me," he assured her, drawing her close. "Your dreams matter to me." As Nathan kissed his bride, he reflected on how a simple act of kindness had led to this unexpected happiness. A starving woman, an abandoned colt, and a cowboy who couldn't turn away from either fate had woven their lives together in ways none of them could have anticipated. 5 years later, the Voss ranch had flourished. The original cabin had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. 3-year-old Thomas and 1-year-old Alina filled the house with laughter and energy. Madeline now taught full-time at the town school, having earned a reputation as a patient and creative instructor. Chance had grown into a magnificent horse, winning several local races and siring foals that Nathan trained and sold for good prices. The mare Julia had been retired to a comfortable pasture, where she enjoyed her days watching over the younger horses. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Nathan and Madeline always rode to the creek where they'd found each other. This year, they brought their children, telling them the story of how a starving woman, a hungry Colt, and a searching cowboy had become a family against all odds. As they picnicked beside the now familiar waters, Thomas playing with toy horses while Alina napped on a blanket, Nathan reached for his wife's hand. "Best decision I ever made," he said, "offering to feed you both together." Madeline's smile, no longer shadowed by hunger or fear, radiated contentment. "And the best words I ever heard," she replied, leaning against his shoulder as they watched their children, their home, and their future unfold before them in the brilliant New Mexico sun.